And welcome to Political Party, putting the cool in political. Today on the show, we've got our debate, Environ-mental. We're going to talk about Tony Abbott being shunned by every government ever, the repeal of the carbon tax and Australia's climate obligations. Following that, we're going to talk about Blundergate, a humorous look at mistakes made by our politicians, including this week, the New Zealand PM tugging on the hair of a waitress and calling it flirting. In Less Sexy Than ISIS, where we talk about the issues overshadowed by the looming ISIS boogeyman, we're going to talk about the commemoration of the Armenian Genocide, and finally, we're going to play a parody media game called True or False, where Hamish is going to read out some parody news headlines and some real headlines, and I'm going to try to decipher which ones are real and which ones are from parody news. So, on the show today, we have special guest Hareesh. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, my name is Hamish Tim, and I'm really into politics. I, of course, study arts politics here at Monash. I am a member of the Liberal Party, so I'm bringing something fresh and new to the show. Hopefully something you haven't heard before, and I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, beautiful. We've had so far everyone we've had on the show has been way left.
I would imagine
Green/Labor supporters. I'd call myself liberal sympathetic. I definitely don't really like any of the parties, but let's see how we go. So today we are talking about environmental, pun intended. What we're going to talk about today is a factual and sort of a little bit subjective look, because we're human, on how climate policy has developed in Australia. So we're going to start off with Tony Abbott being shunned by the entire international community this week. It is not unknown that Australia's climate policy isn't particularly very well received by anyone, be it the Tony Abbott's own cabinet, the votership, or the international community. This week, Australia was criticised by 4 countries: the US, China, India, and Brazil. China accused Australia of unfairly expecting, other nations to bear the brunt of these ambitious targets. The US said that the Australian government's market mechanism for achieving climate change was not compliant with the promises made at the Kyoto summit in 2007 with Kevin Rudd. And Brazil has accused Australia of setting a target that was way under ambitious, so Australia could seem like they are trying to successfully achieve their targets with minimal funding and effort. These are all valid concerns. It's not unknown that Australia's has the highest pollution per capita. Hareesh, what do you think? What are your thoughts on climate change?
It's a very interesting topic, and it's very controversial at the moment. I'm a big supporter in the repeal of the carbon tax, mainly because the carbon tax wasn't an active policy in removing emissions from the atmosphere, and it put a burden on business, and also put a burden on the taxpayer, because their cost of living increased because of the high cost of electricity, which occurred with the implementation of the carbon tax. Now, I do believe in the science around climate change, unlike many liberals in the party, but I am not a climate extremist like many on the left today are. I don't believe that that climate change is destroying our world and will destroy our world in the imminent future. At the end of the day, the climate has not warmed in the last 17 years. The Earth has not warmed in the last 17 years, and that shows, although it doesn't show that the science around climate change is fake or false. It does show that we are not in imminent threat of danger because of this particular issue. I don't believe in the direct action policy, because I don't think giving money to big business, or even any business, is going to solve this issue. But I do believe we need to have a good debate a strong debate around this particular issue. We can't just say the carbon tax is what we're going to do, or direct action is what we're going to do. What we have to do is we have to have a balanced debate. We have to say, okay, both of these policies are not working to achieve the purpose of eliminating carbon emissions or reducing carbon emissions. What we have to do is we have to work harder in order to look at other policy that we haven't ventured into. We haven't ventured into other policies and looking at and debating other policies around climate change. But what I want to see is policy which actually reduces emissions. See, we haven't had a policy around the world, international policy or domestic policy, which has reduced emissions. I want one that reduces emissions and balances our economic interests and doesn't damage our economic position or financial position.
Yep, that's a good point that you brought up about the separation between tangible outcomes and merely throwing money at big business. We're going to have a talk about the direct action plan and viable alternatives after our first song today, which comes from a band called Lostprophets. This song's called Rooftops, and it's about thinking for yourself, which is perhaps some advice that our politicians should take. This is Rooftops.
And welcome back to Political Party. Coming up this segment, discussion about the repeal of the carbon tax.
Yep. So in 2013, at the first day of which Parliament receded to begin election campaigns, Tony Abbott pledged to send a letter regarding tangible outcomes from the repeal of the carbon tax. Tony Abbott did that as his first act in Parliament, introduced a bill that would repeal the carbon tax, gaining him a lot of popular support. This was before, of course, he brought out the 2014 budget. So, in the budget for 2013, was it? Yeah, the 2014 budget, sorry. The federal budget, the government pledged 7 times more money to fighting terrorism than they did to the environment, which isn't a hard target to match because the environmental spending was piss poor. So, we're going to talk about the direct action plan and how it differs to the carbon tax. I think that an interesting point about the carbon tax was that it has proven to be effective in making businesses more financially savvy, but it has not anywhere in the world shown effective and tangible reductions to carbon emissions. So in that sense, it was almost justified to scrap the bill. Hamish, what do you think?
I think, really, the carbon tax didn't have that big an impact on anyone. All it did was give our power producers an excuse to charge us more money when they hardly had to pay any extra. But I think the carbon tax was really more of a symbolic gesture than an actual practical one, showing that Australia could be a world leader on the environment. But again, the effect was really limited. I mean, bringing it in didn't do all that much. Cancelling it doesn't do all that much either.
Yeah. Hareesh, just before the break, was talking about the direct action plan and how instead of putting the onus on the government to spend a lot of money from their budget, what the government did with the direct action plan was privatize the business. So they established a $3 billion fund to pay businesses for emissions reduction projects. They approved more than $1 trillion worth of environmentally friendly and clean energy projects, which isn't hard to do. You just have to give a tick of approval. That's not very...
There's a difference between approving a project and actually funding an established industry.
There was the Labor government introduced a renewable energy target, which is instead of just a carbon emission reduction target, a renewable energy target was set at 20% by 2020. This is still in force because the Liberal government has not repealed this yet. However, they want to reduce it to 15%. Which is only a smaller percentage, but it doesn't look like we're increasing that number at all right now. Hareesh, what do you think?
Well, as I said before, I was a supporter of the repeal of the carbon tax because it didn't really do anything for the environment, and it increased electricity bills for household owners all over this country. In regards to renewable energy target, I'm not really a fan of it because it's a target, Targets really haven't worked well in economics and business as much. over the last 20 years. I don't think it'll really work well in regards to this environmental issue, mainly because we need to go out and achieve this target. And we could say, okay, 20 years' time, we want to reduce emissions by 10%. But if we don't have the policy today to actually reduce those emissions, how are we ever going to reach that target? I think our time and attention needs to be spent on actually reducing these emissions and creating constructive environmental policy, which will help our environment and the clean energy sector. I think Barack Obama has been, well, his presidency has been a bit poor actually for the last 6 years, and I think he hasn't taken leadership on this particular issue. Although there is a clean energy target, well, anyone could really come up with a clean energy target. I think he needs to take more leadership on this issue as a means of leading the world to his clean energy target. But on Australia, I think there needs to be more constructive policy on the environment, although we don't emit as much as other countries. And although, what we do is never really going to have an impact. Our coal industry is huge, and it's powering our country, and it's powering many other countries around the world. And we have already seen countries going away from coal and moving towards clean energy. And if we fall behind, it's going to be a problem. We need to do something now as a means of supporting the clean energy industry. I'm not saying go away from coal. I think coal has really helped us. It's an important part of our economy, but we need to start transitioning, because if the world starts going away from coal, it's really going to hurt us, and we're going to be left behind economically.
Yeah, fair enough. I've actually heard in Germany the cost of solar power, I think this maybe grid solar power, has actually come down to the same level as the cost of non-renewable fuels, and that's a massive milestone. I mean, if solar power is
their
getting...
country's now more powered by renewable energy than it is by fossil fuels.
Yeah, that's incredible.
It's about demand.
Really, though, a lot of the time these targets are just desperate attempts to gain political capital. I mean, notice no politician will ever set a target within 10 years. They'll set them 20 years away and then say, oh, look, we have a target. Yay, vote for us. However, I feel that the best way to create a comprehensive framework would be something along the lines of supporting private industry, because those countries in which industry has taken the initiative and started producing solar panels are the ones which it succeeded the most. I mean, even in the US, their solar panel industry is quite big. Germany's is big. It's not so much because of government action as it is because these industries are leaders in their game that they've managed to achieve quite a high level of renewable energy. And China, in fact, one of the world's leading producers of solar panels, despite not setting targets, is actually doing very well with producing lots of solar panels and using them because it's so cheap for them.
Yeah, the China and the US, particularly Obama, trying to gain a lot of political support for the party in the last era of his presidency, in his last quarter, has made huge gains in terms of renewable energy. They are leading the world and putting the environmental climate change concerns at the forefront of the agenda at all of these global summits, particularly if we all remember the G20 when China and America both came to Australia speaking words of a green, clean energy future, when Australia decided to use that global forum to talk about how future generations would perceive the $7 co-payment.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. After the break, we're going to talk about Kyoto and the second round of commitments which Australia decided not to ratify. Our next song is our Australian Artist of the Week. We have two this week. Our first of which is The Living End, What's on Your Radio, a song about how the radio has an agenda and they're teaching you shit. So this is What's on Your Radio. And we're back.
Hello.
So let's talk about the Kyoto Protocol. I'll quickly give you a rundown of this. Kyoto Protocol is an international treaty that was established in 1997, and most of the countries in the world signed it or ratified it.
Surprise, surprise, it was established in Kyoto.
Yep, in Japan. Most countries signed it or ratified it, like the US obviously just signed it. Australia ratified it, which means that we had a target to meet.
Although we didn't originally ratify it. We only ratified it under Kevin Rudd.
That's right. As part of George Bush's beloved coalition of the willing, Australia had a huge pro-American agenda in the Howard era, and Howard staunchly refused to even acknowledge the existence of the Kyoto Protocol, and was in fact behind because the US had signed it.
Well, the US never ratified it.
Yeah.
They're the only country to do so.
And what happened was the first commitment period, which is regarding the targets of emission, Australia succeeded. Australia was well below the pledge that they pledged to the convention. And the second commitment period has started. Australia has pledged a 5% reduction from carbon levels in 2000. But the second commitment period was coupled with this thing called the Doha Agreement, which would make a higher target than this, and the Doha Agreement would make that commitment binding. Australia did not ratify that target. So Australia has essentially got a target which is easily meetable by any standards, and it is not binding. So the coalition government is free to send their volunteers out into the world to plant trees and stuff.
The Green Army. Well, I guess that's a special treat for the environment.
Yeah, just on this, not very knowledgeable about the Kyoto agreement, but it's a big issue in the Liberal Party. It was back in 2007, 2008 when Kevin Rudd signed it. But I think there were a lot of positives that came out of not signing it in the Howard era, because it did protect our economic interests, especially the coal under the earth in our country. We were able to export the coal, and we were able to use that coal for domestic energy production, and it powered our homes, powered businesses, and powered our economy for so long. And it really, the exporting of that coal to countries like China, countries like India, and other Asian countries in the region really powered our economy during that time, and it gave us 3 to 4% economic growth. Much of our uninterrupted growth has come from the mining boom period, and we've had low interest rates, low inflation, and we've had great economic success with Peter Costello producing 10 budget surpluses, which really helped our economy, helped business, and helped individual people. So I think not signing it had some benefits, although it did have some negatives as well. I think it was a good decision from John Howard. At the end of the day, as you said, we didn't reach our target.
Yep.
Because it was very ambitious, like all energy targets have been in the past. But and that goes to show that we need constructive environmental policy, and the targets are just not working. We're not actually doing anything to reduce emissions. And that's something we really need to focus on as opposed to the targets. So that's me. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thanks for coming.
Got a lecture
Thanks
now,
for your
but
contribution.
thank you. And it's a pretty good show. I like it. Thanks.
Beautiful. Thanks for coming in, Hareesh.
Thanks for showing up.
So, Hamish, where to from here? Obviously, Australia has got no interest in the environment because we have a low carbon pollution and a high...
Well, we've got a high per capita consumption rate.
Right, per capita.
The reason for this, as I see it, is because of our coal-fired power plants.
Yeah.
I can't help but feel that if we got onto renewables earlier in the century and encouraged the manufacture of them, we could potentially have been a world leader in the technology. However,
there's no profit in it though. There's no short or long term benefit to sustainable energy. It's not economically viable when coal is so cheap and so effective.
That's true, but we could have exported it. We could have exported renewable energy systems. However, judging by the fate of Australia's other manufacturing sectors, I really don't know just what kind of chance we would have had.
So, in terms of moving on from here, Australia has done bugger all and will refuse to do bugger all.
Excuse me, the Green Army, thank you very much.
That's let's close this segment talking about the Green Army. There's as part of the government, the Liberal government's direct action plan, they commissioned a group of 15,000 volunteers to clean up national parks.
Probably all
Tasmanians. To clean up national parks and to plant trees. So That's Tony. He's gonna
All right.
give us some
I
volunteers.
do have one quick question though. Do you reckon that countries that outsource should include in their total carbon output all the factories and facilities that they own overseas?
Yeah, that's
Because
a
as a
tough
result, China's
question.
getting unfairly shunted with a lot of emissions when in fact a lot of their factories are foreign owned.
right. But they provided the business environment to put those factories there.
They did, but the factories would still spring up elsewhere if not in China.
Certainly not in Australia. It's the most expensive place to
Yeah,
run a
true.
business everywhere in the world, minus
However,
Switzerland and the Scandinavian countries.
those factories probably wouldn't exist if it weren't for investment. So,
Yep.
do you reckon that should play a role in calculating total carbon emissions?
No, I think if you've got a business operating in your country and your country is emitting that pollution, it means that your country is doing a very good job at fostering business or a very poor job at meeting clean energy targets. Either way, it's on the onus of the government to regulate these sectors, and all governments worldwide certainly need to do more than just give speeches about clean energy. They need tangible results.
Fair enough. I can't help but feel that funding the private sector is the best way to go about it in this case because it will lower the price of such renewables as solar, encourage household adoption. I mean, right now, you can get a 5 kilowatt solar power system for, I think, 8,000 is the cheapest you can get it. And that's 5 kilowatts. That's enough for a single, I reckon that'd be enough for a single house or single person house to live off. It's enough to power a fridge, a computer simultaneously.
And it's cheaper over time, of course, but and there is a government rebate as well, which helps with the most dreaded part about switching to clean energy, which is the high initial investment.
Yes.
That system is very clever in that it will give people more incentive to get clean energy, but we're not seeing that at the moment at all.
Yeah. Which is kind of odd. A lot of clean energy systems, especially in rural areas, will pay themselves off within 2 or 3 years.
Our generation's going to be the one to change all of this, Hamish.
Yes, our generation. There's a lot of pressure on our generation, isn't there?
We're the ones who are going to suffer from the point of no return. We're going to be the generation that meets the technological singularity. We're going to be the generation that drowns in flood waters.
Although we could potentially be the generation that lives forever.
Yeah, did you read the intergenerational report?
No, what's in the intergenerational report?
The population over 65 is projected to double.
Good.
But the working force is projected to stay exactly the same.
Oh, good. Well, good thing the Japanese are big on their robotics technology.
Yeah, we're going to be in all sorts of shit financially in 40 years. So on the environment and
on that optimistic note,
being fearful of stuff. This is our second Australian artist this week. It's also fronted by Jenna McDougall, who is at the forefront of pop rock at the moment. She's incredible, and so is this song. This is a song about not being afraid to speak your mind and to live life as an individual. This is What Are You So Scared Of?
What are you so scared of? And we are back.
Hello. And welcome to Blundergate.
Blundergate. This week's Blundergate, New Zealand. The New Zealand Prime Minister got into a bit of a situation when a waitress at a cafe he frequents complained that he kept pulling on her hair. Now, this is a highly unusual kind of blunder, but one that is highly amusing nonetheless, as it emerged that the New Zealand leader had in fact been pulling on her hair multiple times for quite a while, and she'd actually snapped at him in March. And apparently he's also done it to other girls too, and his wife was highly embarrassed.
Yeah, he was very quick to issue an apology. He was in a cafe repeatedly pulling on the hair of a 26-year-old Auckland citizen,
This has been
Amanda Bailey.
This has been called Tailgate.
Yes, the scandal is called Tailgate. A few days after issuing the apology, Prime Minister, I believe his name is
Key?
John Key.
Yeah.
His name is John Key. He came out and said,
His name is Key
"This
to
is,
understanding.
I shit you not, this is a quote. I believe I am New Zealand's most casual Prime Minister.
Well, that totally justifies pulling on women's hair.
Yep.
It's all right, though. He apologized with 2 bottles of his finest wine. That's really sus. I'm sorry.
Yeah. There's not overly more to say about this guy other than that he's a bit of a dickhead. This by the way, this happened numerous times over a couple of months because he repeatedly went to this same.
He thought, well, no, he said, it's all right. This cafe is very casual. I'm very casual with this cafe stuff, because being casual includes pulling on girls' ponytails.
He didn't seem to be very remorseful in his speech. I'm going to read an excerpt from that for you now. He said, "I'm a friendly guy that likes to interact with the public in friendly ways. I do like to have a bit of laugh and a bit of and I'm probably the most casual prime minister that New Zealand has ever had. Some people have recognized this in the past and said, oh, Prime Minister Key, you have done like an incredible job at making, the populace more relatable to the Prime Minister. And in New Zealand, they're a small, happy country. They don't have any issues. I'm kidding. But
Yeah. Now, see, here's the problem with casual. I think there's a good reason why we don't elect casual leaders. It's because they tend to do silly things in the public eye
like
and make their countries look like a laughing
schooners
stock.
at a pub. With
Hey,
a
there's
footy team.
nothing. That's actually mighty impressive. Well, not mighty impressive, but you get the point.
Yeah. Prime Minister Key has since moved on and is looking forward at his environmental issues is his hot topic for this week. So good luck to him in doing his thing. So we're going to move on to Less Sexy Than ISIS. And we will follow that up with a song because this was a short blundergate this week. We've done really well at keeping blunders out of the public eye. I mean, there was plenty of Anzac Day controversy that sprung up on the day, including a nightclub adjacent to Martin Place in Sydney, who emitted a sound test in the middle of the dawn service moment of silence.
Oh, goodness, that's horrible.
The guy said he was planning on doing the sound test at 7, but accidentally pressed the wrong button.
Yes, the wrong button. That's a good way to gain some publicity for your club.
Even if you acknowledge that was, perfectly reasonable mistake, it still doesn't justify why the bloke was sound checking at a nightclub in Sydney during the dawn service.
Yeah.
In a venue that openly, with a window, looks down at the dawn service. It is beyond me.
That's pretty sus.
Also, what other Anzac Day blunders were there?
Well, speaking of, not so much blunders, but actually that leads to our next segment. Well, there was the whole controversy with the Target and Woolworths advertising campaign based on Anzacs.
Yeah, we spoke about that last week. New Zealand, sorry, not New Zealand. I'm still looking at this article. Woolworths tried to say fresh in our memories, this hashtag campaign, share your stories, blah blah blah. That was dumb.
That was a shameless and cynical attempt to cash in on the deaths of our soldiers, is what it was. Putting it bluntly. And furthermore, Target actually had to withdraw a line of clothing based around Anzacs.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Tell us about it quickly.
Well, I don't know all that much about it, but essentially, I think there was a hoodie or something based around the Anzacs, unless we forget.
Right.
And naturally, because they were just cynically cashing in on the sacrifices of our soldiers, they copped a lot of public controversy for that. So much, in fact, they had to withdraw the product line.
Unbelievable. There's no stopping these people. There was the Zoo Weekly men's magazine had hottest Anzac babes issue this week. That copped
Wait. Anzac babes? You're implying that Anzac women went and fought in Gallipoli with rifles?
They had cover models in bikinis with badges attached to them and
oh god,
military-esque outfits. It was
military-esque is the key.
It's all very, 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 very dumb. I'm staggered this still happens. I went to the dawn service on Saturday and there was food trucks there selling sausages to people. There was a blimp flying around over the city.
You'd think you'd think they'd have some sort of basic PR.
Yeah, no, it's shameless profiteering off a national holiday.
Not just national holiday, a national day of mourning, of
Absolutely.
remembrance.
Absolutely, it was very disrespectful, and to all the children that were there, they weren't paying attention to the dawn service because they were looking at the blimp, right?
Yeah.
There was it was very distracting.
Although I remember when I was a child, I remember questioning, why do we need a specific day to remember our fallen? Surely every day we remember our fallen, and Anzac Day is just a day off.
We're gonna I think we should move on from that discussion.
Yes, we should.
before
Speaking of things that happened on Anzac Day, the Turkish Prime Minister Erdogan, well, that's how you pronounce it. I don't know. I don't care. He's really not worth the effort trying to get it right. So, the Turkish Prime Minister has used, or the Turkish media in general, has used Anzac Day in the commemoration of 100 years in Gallipoli as a blind to hide the commemoration of the Armenian Genocide.
Yeah. This was
The 20th century's first genocide.
This was expected to be the first year that the Turkish government was going to acknowledge the genocide of.
They've been getting
the Armenian
closer.
genocide
They've
on
apologized. They've apologized to Armenians for the harm done to them, but they still
refuse to acknowledge genocide, though, which is the most imperative point. And given that it was 100 years ago, the Turkish government was expected to make that acknowledgement on Saturday, and they didn't.
Funnily enough, one of the points the Turkish government made to excuse themselves is, oh, well, it can't have been a genocide because the word genocide wasn't around yet. The word genocide was coined with specific reference to the Armenian situation.
Yeah.
Massacre.
Bloodbath.
Bloodbath.
Yeah, those kind of formalities don't really hold up. I think it's a really poor diplomatic effort. I mean, obviously there's a restorative justice measure that can come out of this, but it didn't.
I don't think that in itself is a particularly poor diplomatic effort. What is a poor diplomatic effort is Western leaders and countries who still refuse to acknowledge it for fear they might offend Turkey. Didn't even Russia refer to it as a genocide this year?
I was unaware, but I'm not surprised.
Germany has been one of the most stringent accusers of the Turks of genocide, and Turkey's response was, oh, well, you're in a good place to talk about genocides. I think Germany would recognize a genocide. Germany, of all countries, would know what a genocide looks like.
Yeah, there was a huge commemorative event in Armenia, which included a blistering 2.5-hour set from System of a Down, which is perhaps Armenia's most vocal rock artist of all time. They are a very, very big artist representing Armenia, and most of their music is about the Armenian genocide. They made a lot of very, very harsh comments towards Turkey during their set, and in a stand of solidarity at the end of the set, the band got the entire crowd to cheer, "We're still here, we're still alive," before they played their historic song Aerials and Holy Mountains, which are both about denial of that genocide. We're going to play that song now.
Yeah, speaking of which, here we go.
This is System of a Down, Holy Mountains.
Holy Mountains, eh? Bit of a high point. Apologies,
And after a bit of technical difficulty with the studio
what
equipment,
are
we
you
are
talking about?
back.
Technical difficulty. You heard nothing.
Welcome to our parody news segment, which we're spicing up with a bit of a game this week. Hamish, tell us about The Onion, and then tell us about Not The Onion, and talk to us about our game.
So, The Onion is a satirical news site. You may have heard us quote extracts from it in previous weeks, in which news articles are completely false, but still amusing. Not The Onion is a web page where people post links to news articles with absurd names. So in this week's segment, we're going to have Tim try to guess which articles are real and which articles are in fact from The Onion. So we'll start with our first headline. Architect presents Obama with generic options for war memorial that could work for Syria, Libya, Yemen. True or false?
I think that would be a poor diplomatic effort of the US to create a war memorial for wars that they haven't directly
A war
fought in.
memorial for humanity.
I think there was a word you said in that topic, like generic. I think it was sort of gives it away as an Onion article. I'm gonna go with that.
Nah, you are correct. It is The Onion. Next headline: How a maple syrup rebellion is growing in Quebec.
That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard.
Maple syrup rebellion.
Maple syrup rebellion. I can understand if there's like union action or whatever, but from farmers. But I reckon the word rebellion makes it sound like an Onion article.
Well, you are wrong. It is in fact true. Fighting to keep their syrup out of the hands of the powerful Quebec monopoly, producers sneak barrels by night, deal in a black market, and even flee the province.
Oh my god!
Welcome to Canada.
Good job, Canada.
So, next article: US encouraging Cuba to shift towards democratic system of corruption.
Democratic system of corruption sounds like a funny title that some journalist is trying to use to like say that, America is trying to act democratic, but really they're pushing them towards corruption for their own benefit.
Exactly.
I'm going to say true.
Well, it's actually an Onion article. I'm
Right.
terribly sorry.
Yeah. Okay. I should have known better.
Here's an interesting one. China says, please stop hiring funeral strippers.
That sounds crazy enough to be true, but do they have like a stripper industry where they send people off to funerals? I don't know. I'm going to say
Yes.
true because it
Yes,
sounds
they do.
ridiculous.
And it is in fact true. Isn't that crazy? Funeral strippers in China. I guess they've got so few women. They need to see the odd one every now and again.
They need somewhere to put all of that money from that
Here's
business.
one. US ranks happiest among heavily armed nations.
I'm gonna say that one's true, because the US, out of all heavily armed nations, like I assume they're not the happiest nation on earth. They're just the happiest that have lots of guns, and all the countries that have lots of guns have lots of death.
You are correct.
Woo!
That's probably because the arms industry is domestic in the US. They
Yeah.
make all their own guns. A lot of employment in that. So, Ron Paul withholding presidential endorsement until true libertarian candidate enters race.
Is that supposed to be a joke because Ron Paul's from the Tea Party and that's libertarian? I don't know. I don't know if they acknowledge directly that they're libertarian, so I'm going to say that's an Onion article.
You are correct.
Woo.
It is in fact an Onion article. Next, ISIS and Taliban announce jihad against each other. Here's the subtitle. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, please forgive my horrible pronunciation, the leader of ISIS, has called Taliban leader Mullah Muhammad Omar a fool and illiterate warlord. That sounds pretty ridiculous, eh?
The Taliban's operating in Pakistan, and ISIS is not active in Pakistan, so I'm going to say that's false. But the subheadline sounded way too specific, so I'm going to stick with false. But
well, it is in fact true.
wow,
That's pretty funny, eh?
that's staggering.
Doctors desperately trying to Photoshop Kim Jong-un back to life.
I did hear about this when Kim Jong was when he disappeared for a couple of weeks and they thought he was dead. But I think I definitely think that happened. But the title said doctors are trying to Photoshop him back to life.
Yeah, well, you may be onto something there, or you may not.
I reckon it's false.
You are correct. It is in fact false. But knowing the craziness of North Korea, it could be true if it weren't for the word doctors.
Yeah.
Here's a funny headline. Azerbaijan's government is trying to patent breakfast.
As a country that receives all of their money from BP, I would say that Azerbaijan absolutely is not trying to patent breakfast. That sounds like something that's straight off the Onion.
Yeah, it really does, doesn't it? Which is all the funnier because it's true.
You're kidding. Please explain this to me.
So essentially, Azerbaijan is trying to come up with a national cuisine. They didn't really have one before. So they want to make a breakfast mandatory for all the country's hotels to serve. But in order to have this breakfast, they wanted to patent it so that other countries couldn't go and ruin it or hybridize it. And so they patented breakfast. Patented.
That's the greatest thing I've ever heard. Good job,
Yes.
Azerbaijan. You can.
Yes, no.
You
Never-
go right ahead and patent breakfast.
You go ahead.
I'm going to go and get a muffin after this show and enjoy
Yeah.
my own breakfast.
Let your freak flag fly, Azerbaijan. And here's the final one. Children threat under control, says Israel.
Israel.
Israel, yeah. Palestinian children.
I reckon that's.
They're dangerous. They throw rocks and things.
I reckon that's true. I reckon there's like. I don't think they mean children like infants, but I think I don't know some 18, like minus 18 people might be trying to rebel against the government.
Throwing rocks at heavily armored.
Netanyahu's not particularly popular in that country, and I assume disenfranchised youth want to rebel a bit. I'm going to say that's true.
Well, it is in fact false. However, Israeli soldiers had very disproportionate reactions when Palestinian children threw rocks at them, such as shooting them.
Yeah, that
lethally.
That happens. That's almost genocide.
Throwing,
when you think about it,
exactly.
It's ethnic cleansing.
Throwing rocks at heavily armored soldiers wearing Kevlar vests and helmets. The soldier then turns and shoots the child. Surely that is something of a disproportionate reaction.
So, I don't know. I guess that won't be happening for very long because, as Netanyahu told us in week 2's blunder, all the Arabs are coming out in droves to vote against the Netanyahu government at the polls in the election. So sooner or later, Netanyahu's not going to have the power that he wants, and there's not going to be any more ethnic cleansing because all the Arab minorities are colluding.
Yeah.
So they say. I quickly want to talk to you about Obama has been flogging the PR this week. He's been doing a very, very good job at gaining some popularity with the people. It seems almost
Luther,
like that
my anger translator, to join me here tonight.
I'm going to quickly give you this segment from Obama's speech. Obama's speech to the constituent dinner. Sorry, the correspondence dinner.
Hold on to your lily white butts. In our fast-changing world, traditions like the White House Correspondents' Dinner are important. I mean, really? What is this dinner? And why am I required to come to it? Jeb Bush, do you really want to do this? Because despite our differences, we count on the press to shed light on the most important issues of the day. And we can count on Fox News to terrify old white people with some nonsense.
That's Keegan-Michael Key's character Luther, which is like the anger translator. It's like a bit from this show called Key and Peele.
Pretty funny, eh?
And Obama has gotten a lot of really good press for
it
this,
was a really good PR move.
Yeah.
Anyways, listening to Political Party, putting the cool in political.
See you next week.